A revolution to turn adversities into triumphs. Kranti, an NGO founded by Robin Chaurasiya, has been helping daughters of sex workers become the Krantikaris that our society needs. These young women, nurtured by the organization, have become the first girls from India's red light areas to study abroad, receive UN awards, and establish their presence at both national and international forums. Setting the precedents, Shweta Katti is one such Krantikari who has battled against all social stigma to become a true beacon of courage. Thank you very much, Robin, for coming to the studio and giving us an amazing perspective into your lives, which I was talking to you about. And hopefully we'll be able to capture some of those really poignant moments and lessons in the little time that we have in the show. So let me begin with you, Robin. American citizen, born, brought up in America, studied there, even served in the US Air Force as a lieutenant. And then you leave all that and you end up running an NGO called Kranti right in the middle of one of the most notorious red light areas in the world, Kamatipura. Yeah. So let's talk about that journey of how you ended up firstly in the US and your journey through your trauma, your inflection points, your pain, and how that pain kind of prompted you to create a movement which is hopefully going to alleviate that pain in many other people as well.
Yes, amazing. So I, as you said, born and raised in the US, and my parents were immigrants. My father was an engineer, and a very typical Indian American successful family. And yet, all of my childhood memories were really surrounded by the type of violence and domestic violence that happened in the home. And as a young child, you don't understand what's quite wrong or that something is off in your family. And yet, those were my only childhood memories, even to this day, that I carry. And slowly, of course, as you get into school, you realize the things you're supposed to talk about or not talk about. And, you know, the older I became, the more aware I became that something might be off in my family or something is wrong.
And this is basically your father, domestic violence against your mother.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I think both of my parents struggled with mental health a lot. The idea that you at 25 get married in India, move across the world to a country where you don't speak the language, don't have any friends, family, resources, connections, things like that was quite a struggle for my mother. And maybe if she had lived in a community where she was comfortable, maybe the schizophrenia wouldn't have been so out of control. But it was. And, you know, I just have such crazy memories also of my mother doing things like taping up the mirrors in our bathrooms and saying that, you know, spirits and ghosts will come through there to attack us. And really young, when I was 4, 5, 6, I have memories of my parents trying to, you know, burn each other with the iron while ironing, and my father, you know, like literally beating my mother. And yet on the other side, I was an American kid. And my father also was very feminist in many ways, in thinking my sister and I, he raised us to be very, oh, you're allowed to do whatever you want and you're allowed to become whatever you want. I'm not going to force you into any of this. And I think it was the challenge for my mind to understand, like, what the fact that I was born in this country is what makes me worthy of not being necessarily beaten regularly or not being living under control of some, you know, of a man or whatever it may be. And yet the fact that my mother was Indian, is that what makes her, you know, what makes domestic violence okay? And I think that all of these questions kind of started off very early in my mind. When I was 13, 14, 15, I started getting into a lot of volunteer work. Now I realize, one, that I was doing that volunteer work in order to escape the house. And two, I was doing it in order to, I couldn't go around telling people like, hey, this is what's going on in my house. So in some ways, it was my way of trying to help other people without having to talk about that. That, okay, I can't help my mother, but at least I can help other women. And eventually, when I became much older and, you know, my father was alive at the time, but when I was in the military, you know, it was such a big moment for me to go back home just once. I only saw him once after I left for college. But to go back home, and the one time that he raised his voice and started, you know, that I said, you have a choice right now in this moment. I have the ability to take care of my mother myself now. And if you don't want to get your shit together, then I will take her and I will take responsibility for her. And I think that was the one turning point, because he was getting so much older and struggling with health, where finally, things settled down a bit, but I was already shaped by that my entire life.
So you start volunteering basically in those places and those areas where you are hurting the most.
Absolutely.
And you are seeing that hurt happen the most. How did you end up in Kamatipura?
I think I always knew since that 12, 13, 14 type of age, when I knew that I was going to be volunteering, something truly called to me about living a meaningful life, I guess. And when we look at, my father, somebody who's considered very successful, graduated from IIT, went on a full scholarship, moved to America, worked for Boeing, I had the
image of success?
I knew that it was all false.
A facade of success.
Yes, it was a facade.
It was fake.
Yeah.
None of it was true inside.
Yes, and how much does it matter that we have a 3-car garage and there's 2 cars in there all the time, and my sister and I both had cars when we were 16. Where did that get us? The violence was still going on. And I think that those kinds of moments really made me realize that, never mind all of that stuff. I've had it, I've experienced it, but I know that that doesn't possibly lead to happiness. Otherwise, my father should have been the happiest person in the world. And eventually kept volunteering with different organizations, traveled all over the world, backpacked through Central America, volunteered with organizations supporting women and children in the Middle East, in East Africa, and eventually somehow found my way back to India.
Can I have a question, maybe a suggestion? If you were wandering around helping people, you could have stayed in one place and just helped people there. So maybe this wandering around was coming back home.
It was. Part of it was this need to escape and see the world, and to know that there's something beyond this life, or beyond this, do well in college and go on to, of course I was in the military as well. And I think the dichotomy of this idea of the work that I'm doing to help people, and yet my full-time job is about bombing people, right? There was just some grave
dichotomy
mismatch of what reality really is.
I like the other mismatch also, the reason why you left the military. Let's talk about that. No, that's important. That's important.
Yes.
Especially in the today's context when there is a lot of...
The Supreme Court, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I got kicked out. So I was a first lieutenant, and technically I should have been, I should have been captain. I was given a memorandum that said, you are being denied your promotion to captain for the following reasons. A, you have engaged in homosexual conduct. That's the end of the memo. And I still have it, even after all these years. But just, the military...
So you were kicked out because you chose to exercise your option of telling.
Yes.
Because in the US forces, if you choose not to tell, the forces will look the other way.
Yeah.
Right?
So that was another, when my story came out, it was all over the news, from like the Los Angeles Times, Chicago Tribune, everything. But the reason it was so crazy is because it talked about this catch-22. For the people who want to stay in, we're going to do whatever we can to kick them out. There were even people in the military whose full-time job it was to go around to gay bars trying to find out who's gay. And then on the other hand, here I was saying, hey, I'm married to a woman, let me, this is done and over with. And they were kept sending me memorandum saying, we're keeping you in, we're keeping you in, we're keeping you in. So the idea that the law is so arbitrary, and it can be exercised like this over here, and it can be exercised like this over here, then of course, being a triple minority as a woman, as an Indian, as a lesbian, all of those things, it was quite a learning experience. That's all I can say. And the biggest lesson of it was learning to live as your true self. Which is something that I also feel very connects so deeply to this community and to Kamatipura, to the sex workers. Just being able to live your reality without any shame and without any regret, and to say I lived as openly and as genuinely me as I could.
So let's talk about your first visit to Kamatipura. What happens when you reach Kamatipura?
I come as a very delusional American kid who thinks that, there's some good to be done, some help, help to be given, whatever it may be.
Souls to be saved.
Yes, of course. And I, with all my American notions of education and this and that and everything, and then I end up volunteering with an organization for about 7 months, 8 months in Mumbai, which is a very large anti-trafficking organization, and they help the police do raids in the brothels. The girls are removed from the brothels and put into this NGO. And I lived in the organization, I lived with the girls, and I think it was one of the biggest learning experiences of my life. it's like these girls are, of course, we know all the crazy stories about how 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old girls are trafficked from Nepal and Bangladesh and forced into sex work at such a young age. All of those things. But it was the shock for me was that when they're taken out of the brothel, sometimes they're put into a completely different prison. And I think...
I want to go slow here because I think a lot of our viewers need to be handled through this process.
Sure.
So many of our viewers may not know this, but I think sex trafficking is number 3 in the world in terms of crime. Number 1 is drugs, number 2 is weapons, and number 3 is human trafficking, and sex trafficking forms a major part of that. And India, fortunately or unfortunately, in many ways, I'd say fortunately for another reason because our laws are probably much more stricter. But unfortunately, India is both triple, the source, the conduit and the consumer of child workers, child sexual workers. I want you to just walk us through what is the typical experience of a girl who's 10, 12 years old, who's been either sold, kidnapped, mostly sold by her parents or by whoever. How they are brought in, how they are physically moved from one location to the other. I'm sure there are checkpoints on the way where, you know, it's all sorted out, payments are made or whatever. I don't know. I mean, if a bunch of 20 girls are being moved from Nepal or Assam to Bombay, it can't be a school excursion, right? So it has to be a full operation that is happening over decades. Describe that journey to me.
I'll just share one story of a woman who is still part of Kranti. She's a full-time staff member now. And she actually, at the age of 6 or 7, her mother passed away, father had got remarried, this woman didn't want her in the house. She ran off to, just ran away from home one day, ended up joining a circus and traveling with them as a dancer. She thought she was a very talented dancer. They'd put her on stage. She did that for almost 2 or 3 years. Then finally some man says, oh, you're so talented, we'll take you to the big city to be a professional dancer. And he takes her by maybe age 9 or so. She's not quite sure because, you know, sells her to a brothel in Mumbai. Now this is a very different story because it was one person specifically. Sells her to a brothel in Mumbai for 2 years until she starts menstruating. She's, you know, the cook and cleaner and the errand runner in the brothel. And then at 11, she gets her first period. And then basically, it's auction time. And everyone in the community knows that this girl is up for auction, her virginity. And eventually, it's a police officer who buys her virginity. He comes that night, and she fights and screams and bites and does whatever she possibly can. She has no idea what's about to happen, but she just knows something is wrong. And he goes away and yells at the brothel keeper that, hey, you know, I'll be back tomorrow and she better, you know, cooperate. So, not tomorrow, I'll be back in a couple days. And this girl at this point is locked in a cage and they pour chili powder on her genitals and basically say, this is like, either you deal with him or this is how you're going to be treated for the next, you know, no water, no food, nothing for 2 days. And then of course the man comes back and she shuts up. And she spent the next 8-9 years doing sex work or being forced, you know, there and never earned a penny of what she, you know, earned. Never saw a single rupee of it. At 16, 17, she's, again, the age is very uncertain, but 16, 17, she falls in love. I mean, that might be a very, not the right use of the term, but that's how she talks about it at this point.
No, it's absolute right use of the term. For her, it was love.
Yeah, for her, it absolutely
Who are we to judge it was anything else?
So a customer comes along, he falls in love with her as well, and they make this plan to, you know, to kidnap her and to get her out, and she runs away with him, has 3 or 4 children. Eventually, he, you know, also turns into abusing drugs and alcohol and this and that, and sexually abusing her daughters. She comes back to Mumbai. The 2 daughters are given to Kranti, and she goes back to sex work. That's the only way that she knows to support her family or to earn anything. So I think that's a very typical life story. We have another couple girls who have been trafficked from different, we have one girl from Bangladesh who, you know, they take you across a river and put you on a train and, I mean, first of all, they of course beat you up, threaten you. You're in a country where you don't speak the language anymore. You don't know how to ask for help or where to go for help. You're very specifically taught that the police will not help you. They'll put you in jail, those kinds of things. And so it's this whole process of
indoctrination.
yeah, I mean, they're so young. They're so young, 12, 13, 14, especially at that age. You can imagine any child growing up in a small village anywhere in India or in Bangladesh, not having access to, never been to school, maybe been to first or second standard, that's it. And this is your whole world. You don't know anything about, you've literally been picked up from here, stuck over here. You don't know the language, you don't know anyone. You're at the mercy of,
The brothels.
yeah, and that's just, after a couple years, then you can start thinking about like either how do I get away from here. But you have, aside from the customers who are coming in, you have no contact with outside world. Who do you turn to for help, or who do you even ask? When the police come, these girls are hidden in, sometimes they're hidden in
lofts and attics.
What are they called? The pani ka tanki and
water tanks.
Yeah, gigantic water tanks. And I mean, you stick 2 or 3 girls in there. And I mean, when the system within India, of course, like I said, this girl in particular was purchased by a police officer. But the system that is set up there to also protect the brothel keepers and to not get them caught, and all those things are also so complex in India. Like you said, it's a source country, it's a destination country, it's a transit country. All the things that happen under our noses and are ignored by law enforcement and so many other officials is just, what do we truly think of our daughters, or how do we truly value them?
I want to now pick up from that point where you spoke about that this 12-year-old girl who is then subjected to 7, 8, 10, I don't know how many years of this horror, is one day finally rescued and then thrown into a rescue home, which is, if not worse, about as abject in terms of the treatment. It's almost like she is being persecuted for having been compelled to sell her body.
Exactly.
Sell not her body, her body was sold by somebody else because she's not getting the money also for it.
Exactly.
And then she's put in a rescue home, which you told me was like overstuffed with people, cockroaches in the food, persecution happening there, all of that. And that's what drove you to...
If I have ever been, I mean, that veil that lifts not from the stupid American kid who set out to do, it was absolutely heartbreaking. Living in this home with the 120 or sometimes, even more girls, I mean, like everywhere from 12, 13, 14 to maybe 17, 18, 20 max. And just watching their lives waste away in front of their eyes. And, some of these, a lot of times these organizations talk about like, the skills that they're teaching them or about, empowering them in some way. What has changed between the time that you were taken from that village in Bangladesh, put through this entire years of trauma? There's no healing within this system. You're then forced to, eat the food with cockroaches and sleep in bunk beds and wait for a case, wait for some court official to decide, okay, now it's time to ship her back to Bangladesh. You take them back, and while I was living at that organization, I saw within 7 months a girl return there 3 times.
She returned?
Yeah.
To the rescue home?
Yeah.
3 times?
Yeah, because basically after they send you back, then what? The entire community knows that you were trafficked. You're now stigmatized within your community. You have absolutely no skills that have been developed over it's not like you can live some other life. Better than dealing with the stigma and all of those things there.
Come back.
At least maybe you can earn and support yourself, since nobody else is going to support you. So I've watched kind of the cycle happen over and over. And then, intervention is not just about, okay, we took you out from the brothels oftentimes. And agreed, everyone has their own role. Maybe the police or the organizations that do the rescues, they do the rescues. They bring those girls out, the rescues, whatever. But on the other hand, what is the journey for that individual like? The trauma of not just the years of forced slavery that she's been through, but then also living in these homes without any control over anything about your life, about what you eat, about what your schedule is, about absolutely nothing. And then this slow process of like constantly being told that you did something wrong in order to end up where you ended up. Where is the healing process in that? So I think for me that was like just such a shock that it really just made me realize like how do we value these girls, or how do we treat them? Like just something to be sold, something to be gotten rid of. Oh no, another daughter's been born. Let's just, we'll just sell this one. Like we talk about women's rights and
I don't think it happens maybe with that attitude. I don't think any mother, any parent would happily sell off a girl. I think it's like we discussed, we are all victims of victims of victims.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are many economic factors and so many other factors that it's almost like, I mean, I don't know what would put a parent into a situation where this is the best option, right? Even when we look at what's been going on in Afghanistan the past couple, few months or year or whatever, the things, the choices that people are being forced to make that you would never make under normal circumstances. Many people in India and Bangladesh are living under those circumstances.
So I personally believe that this statement that choices that people make is a misnomer if you're not in those shoes.
It's not a
if you're in
choice.
those shoes, it's not a choice.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It is fait accompli.
Yeah.
Right? Where is the choice there?
Yeah.
So I want to now talk to Shweta, because you speak of it as a fly on the wall, as largely a privileged person.
Absolutely.
Who had an opportunity to observe this as a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
And Shweta actually went through it.
Yeah.
तो श्वेता, मैं आपसे अभी पूछना चाहता हूँ, आप अपनी जर्नी बताइए. आपकी पैदाइश हुई है कामाटीपुरा के ब्रोथल में, और अपनी ग्रैंडमदर से आप कहानी बताइए मेरे को, दादी से बताइए कहानी.
हाँ, तो मेरी नानी हमारी फैमिली, मेरी फैमिली कर्नाटका से है, नॉर्दर्न कर्नाटका, बेलगम के पास. तो मेरी नानी की शादी करवा दिया गया था एक आदमी के साथ, जिनका मेरे नाना के साथ, जिनका एक छोटा सा घर था शायद कमाटीपुरा में. और हमारे गांव का कुछ ना कुछ रिश्ता था रेड लाइट एरिया से, क्योंकि काफ़ी औरतें देवदासी सिस्टम में चले जाती थी, जो सिस्टम में जहाँ पे आपको भगवान से शादी करवा दिया जाता है, जो कर्नाटक और महाराष्ट्र में प्रैक्टिस करते हैं. तो वो रिश्ता रहा है. तो आई थिंक उसी के थ्रू, कनेक्शन के थ्रू वो शादी करवाई गई थी. एंड फिर जब मेरे नाना जी जो थे वो बहुत दारू पीते थे और नशा करते थे, तो उसी के वजह से उनकी जल्दी से जल्दी मौत हो गई. और उसी के तभी मेरी नानी मम्मी से प्रेग्नेंट थी. तो फिर वो उनकी डेथ हो गई. तो नानी क्या करेगी, तो नानी ने फिर कम्युनिटी में घर काम करना चालू कर दिया, जो धंधागर होता है उनके वहाँ पर खाना बनाना. मेरी मम्मी भी वहीं पे पली बड़ी है. तो ये मेरे कैसे हम कैसे आए रेड लाइट एरिया में, वो उसकी कहानी है. फिर मेरी मम्मी भी काफ़ी टाइम तक उसी एरिया में थी, स्कूल जाती थी. आई थिंक बालवाड़ी जो टाइम होता था तब जाती थी. पर जो जहाँ पर मेरी नानी काम करती थी, उनकी जो ब्रॉथल ओनर जो थे, वो उनका कहीं ना कहीं ये सोच था कि अगर ये आगे जाके पढ़ेगी, मेरी माँ अगर वो आगे जाके पढ़ेगी तो फिर वो चटक हो जाएगी. हाँ, वो नहीं, उसको फिर काम में नहीं लेकर आ पाएंगे. तो उसने मेरी नानी बहुत गरीब सी इंसान थी, बहुत शांत. और क्योंकि सर्कमस्टांसेस ऐसे थे कि सिचुएशन ऐसा था कि लोगों के जैसे मानना पड़ता है. तो फिर उनको लगा कि हाँ सही बोल रहे हैं कि उन मम्मी को शायद उनके नाना की याद आ रही है, यहाँ पे तबीयत खराब हो रहा है, क्योंकि उनकी तबीयत खराब हो गई थी. तो एक सिचुएशन बन गया था जहाँ पर वो थोड़ा सा वापस जाना. नहीं, मम्मी को नहीं जाना था, बट शी कुड वो मैनिपुलेट कर पा रहे थे ना, वो जो धंधा करके आंटी थी, वो सिचुएशन को थोड़ा सा मैनिपुलेट कर पा रहे थे. तो वो सोचकर उन्होंने फ़ायदा उठाया उस मौके का, और उन्होंने मेरे नानी को कन्विंस किया कि ये अच्छा होगा कि आप अपनी बेटी को गांव भेज दो. यहाँ पर वो ठीक से नहीं रह पा रही है, बीमार गिर रही है, वो अपने नाना को बहुत याद कर रही है. तो उसी चक्कर में मम्मी बहुत अच्छे पढ़ाई करती थी, तो टीचर भी आई थी मेरे नानी को बोलने के लिए कि क्यों गाँव भेज रहे हो, अच्छी पढ़ती है, अच्छा पढ़ लेती है. पर कोई नहीं माना. तो फिर वो गांव चले गए, और फिर गांव में कोई ध्यान देने वाला नहीं था, नाना ही थे, और कितना ध्यान रखेंगे, गरीबी में पले बड़े हैं हम. तो फिर मम्मी का उम्र, और उसी बीच में फिर मम्मी को भी देवदासी बनाया गया था, जहाँ पर उनकी शादी भगवान से करवा दी गई, क्योंकि वो एक ही लड़की है घर में. हमारे नानी की एक ही बेटी है. और कभी कभी अलग अलग सोच की वजह से देवदासी बनाया जाता है, बट हमारे घर पे इसके लिए बनाया था कि वो मम्मी का ख्याल रख पाए, क्योंकि कोई और लड़का नहीं था, कोई नहीं.
मतलब अगर वो शादी होकर ब्याह होकर चले जाएगी तो
नानी का ख्याल भगवान से कराओ, ताकि वो. तो यही सोच से फिर मेरी मम्मी को फिर देवदासी बनाया गया था. फिर जब उम्र हुई तो वो जब आए शहर में वापस, तब उनके साथ ज़बरदस्ती हुई थी. उनको 1-2 लोगों के पास भेजा गया था का सेक्स वर्क के लिए. तो तभी बहुत बहुत मतलब उनको बहुत ट्रॉमेटाइज हो गए थे वो बीमार गिर गए अचानक से, उनको हो ही नहीं रहा था। और मेरी नानी का ऐसा कोई सोच नहीं था कि मेरी मम्मी को इसी काम में डालना, वो ऐसा था कि यही जिंदगी है। तो उन्होंने
और कुछ पता भी नहीं।
एग्जैक्टली, तो उन्होंने वो एक्सेप्ट कर लिया था। तो फिर जैसे उनकी बेटी बीमार गई, उन्होंने बोला मैं किसी का नहीं सुनने वाली, मेरी बेटी को जैसे जीना है जैसे रहना है। क्योंकि मेरी नानी मेरी माँ से बहुत प्यार करती थी। तो फिर जब मैंने ये कहानी सुनी थी तो मुझे बहुत कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन, मुझे बहुत गड़बड़ महसूस हो रहा था कि
कैसे हो सकता है कि वो अपनी बेटी से प्यार भी करती है और फिर उसको
वही, और ये कैसे, और मुझे बहुत गुस्सा आ रहा था। मेरी नानी तो काफ़ी साल हो चुके हैं गुजर के, तो मुझे बहुत अचानक, क्योंकि मम्मी ने भी ये बात मुझे बहुत सालों तक नहीं बताई थी। मेरे लिए मम्मी फैक्ट्री में काम करती थी सालों से, मुझे पता ही नहीं था।
तो आपको भी पता नहीं था अभी तक?
अभी
रिसेंटली तक
2-3 साल, कुछ साल पहले ही पता चला
ये सब पता लगा कि माँ के
साथ ऐसा हुआ है,
नानी की क्या ट्रॉमा थी।
मम्मी को बहुत टाइम तक अंधेरे रूम पे रखा था, वो महीनों तक उन्होंने लाइट नहीं देखा था।
महीनों तक लाइट नहीं देखा? क्यों?
ऐसे ही बंद करके रख देते थे घर के अंदर,
ताकि वो बात सुने।
हाँ, और पता मुझे रीज़न इतना याद नहीं है, पर वो कुछ तो उन्होंने मुझे बताया कि वो महीनों तक उन्होंने लाइट नहीं देखा था, बाहर नहीं जा पा रहे थे। और काफ़ी ये भी हो जाता है कि लड़की की हमारे समाज में जो सोच है लड़कियों को बाहर नहीं भेजना चाहिए, तो उसी के वजह से काफ़ी बंदिशें थी। और स्पेशली वो कम्युनिटी में तो काफ़ी बंदिशें रहती हैं लड़कियों को अगर वो वहाँ पे हैं। तो ऐसा सिचुएशन था। तो फिर मम्मी ने फिर झगड़ा किया, मम्मी बीमार से ठीक हुई, बोली मैं तो अपने दम पे खड़े होंगी, मैं अपना काम करूँ। तो क्योंकि वो कम्युनिटी से आए थे, उनका सेंस ऑफ, जैसे कि बाकी औरतों का ऐसा होता है कि उनके पास चॉइस ही नहीं होता, अभी जाए तो जाए कहाँ। मम्मी वहीं पे पली बड़ी, वो समझ सकते और वो खड़े रह पाए खुद के लिए। और मेरे नानी का सपोर्ट था तो उनको कोई डर नहीं था। तो फिर उन्होंने फैक्ट्री में काम करना शुरू किया। तो करते करते उनको किसी से प्यार हो गया। फिर जब हुआ तो फिर, क्योंकि मेरी मम्मी देवदासी है, वो शादी नहीं कर सकते। मम्मी का प्यार हो गया, पर मम्मी को जिनसे प्यार हुआ वो थोड़े से गड़बड़ से इंसान थे। गड़बड़ नहीं थे, जो भी थे। मम्मी को किसी से प्यार हो गया तो फिर उन्होंने कहीं किसी और से शादी कर ली गाँव जाके। पर मम्मी ने सच में उनसे बहुत प्यार किया था। वो अभी भी उनके बारे में बात करते तो देख पाते कि उन्होंने सच में उनसे बहुत प्यार किया था। तो फिर उनको था कि एक बार मैं उनके साथ रात गुजारूंगी, मुझे बस उनका एक प्यार की निशानी, थोड़ा सा रोमांटिक आइडिया था, प्यार की निशानी चाहिए थी उनको। तो उन्होंने एक रात उनके साथ बिताया और उन्होंने बोला था कि मैं इस इंसान के साथ वापस कभी नहीं बात करूंगी। और फिर उन्होंने कभी किया भी नहीं। उनको आई गेस वो अपना प्यार का एक चीज़ पकड़ के चलना था, तो वो चले। तब मेरा जन्म हुआ एंड तो फिर तब से
That's how you grew up in कमाटीपुरा। और आपके बचपन की आप मेरे को बताइए कि कैसा, क्योंकि लोग हम बात भी कर रहे थे इससे पहले कि लोगों में एक धारणा है कि ये कमाटीपुरा या कोई भी ब्रॉथल से, इधर भी है दिल्ली में जीबी रोड, हर एक सिटी में एक इलाका माना जाता है जो उस इलाके का रेड लाइट एरिया। वहाँ पे एक बिलीफ है कि जो औरतें वहाँ काम करती हैं, उनके जो बच्चे होते हैं, वो उनको भी उसी प्रोफेशन में डालना चाहते हैं। तो आपकी तो मदर और नानी दोनों ही उस प्रोफेशन में थी और आप बड़ी भी हुई कमाटीपुरा में, लेकिन आपको उन्होंने बिल्कुल प्रोटेक्ट करके रखा। तो ये क्या कहानी है? क्योंकि लोगों के मन में एक तरीके का वहम है, मिथ है कि एक बार एक औरत वहाँ चली गई तो बस उसके बाद उसका जो भी है, उसके बच्चे भी हैं, वो भी वही
तो बात है। मतलब बचपन से, क्योंकि वो अभी सबकी रियलिटी अलग अलग है। अभी मैं अपनी ही रियलिटी बता सकती हूँ, मैं कैसे पली बड़ी, मेरे साथ क्या हुआ, मैंने क्या देखा। और मुझे कहीं वो बंदिशें नहीं महसूस हुई है, अलग अलग लेवल पे महसूस हुआ। पर ये जो आइडिया है, ये जो सोच है कि उस एरिया से हम बाहर ही नहीं जा सकते, वो मुझे पता है कि वो बहुत लोगों के लिए सच भी हो सकता है, पर मेरे लिए वो सच नहीं था। मेरे लिए मेरा जो सपोर्ट सिस्टम था वो मेरा कम्युनिटी था। और ये जो सोच, मुझे बहुत लोग बोलते हैं कि तुम कैसे एस्केप किया, ये मुझे एस्केप करने की ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ी। मुझे बचपन से मेरे ना ही कभी सोच में आया है, ना ही मेरे से किसी ने बोला है कि तुम मेरे कम्युनिटी में नहीं बोल। बाहर बहुत सुनने मिला है, पर मेरे कम्युनिटी में ऐसे नहीं बोला।
कि बाहर वाले लोग बोलते हैं। हाँ। और आपके एरिया में आपने मेरे को बताया कि जैसे कोई कस्टमर भी अगर ग्राहक आता है तो हाँ, आपको उठा के वो बाहर भेज देते हैं।
तो जैसे कि मेरी मम्मी अभी फैक्ट्री में जाती थी, सुबह 7-8 बजे वो 8 बजे वो निकल जाते थे, शाम को 7 बजे वो घर आते थे। अभी पूरा दिन हम बच्चे थे, मैं और मेरी 2 बहनें, और साथ में ही पले बड़े, तो कौन देखेगा। मेरी जो सबसे छोटी बहन है ना, उनका परवरिश एक आंटी ने किया जो वहाँ पे नेपाल से, जो वो वहाँ पर धंधा करते थे, उनका और इतना भरोसा रहता है और उन्होंने उसको इतना ऐसे पाल पोस के बड़ा किया उनकी अपनी बेटी, क्योंकि उनके बच्चे नहीं थे, तो उन्होंने एकदम ऐसे उनको पाला, मेरी बहन को पाला पोसा जैसे अपनी बेटी है, और खिलाना पिलाना भर भर के। वो मारती भी थी, स्कूल नहीं जाती थी तो उठ के। और मैं आपको एक बहुत फनी सा कहानी बताती हूँ कि कितना एफर्ट जाता है, क्योंकि स्कूल में टीचर्स सपोर्ट नहीं करते, गाली देते हैं, मारते, गाली तो नहीं दी थी पर मारते हैं, तो वो जो इंटरेक्शन, वो खुशी तो नहीं मिलती वो सबसे। तो मेरा भी कभी मन नहीं रहता था स्कूल जाने का, मेरी बहनों का भी नहीं था, तो मुझे तो ज़बरदस्ती फिर भी भेज देते हैं। मैं फिर भी अच्छी बच्ची थी तो मैं सुन लेती थी। अभी हमारी सबसे छोटी बहन, उसको नहीं जाना था तो नहीं जाना था, और वो हट करके रोती थी, धोती थी, सब कुछ। तो अभी आंटी लोग उसको पकड़ के मारते थे, चल चल चल। और तभी आते थे खारी वाले अंकल, आते थे डब्बा लेके, उसमें खारी बटर शटर सब कुछ, और उनको, मेरी बहन को बहुत पसंद करती थी। वो अपना पूरा बिजनेस छोड़ के, अपना काम छोड़ के, उसको उठा के गोदी में उठा के, ज़बरदस्ती उठा के लेके जाके स्कूल में छोड़ के आते थे। ये कमिटमेंट है कम्युनिटी का। तो ये जो सोच है ना कि ये कम्युनिटी में लोग ऐसे ही हैं, ये बहुत गड़बड़ है।
अब उल्टा आप मेरे को ये बता रहे हो कि बाहर वालों की सोच ऐसी है,
ऐसी
कि वो बाहर निकलने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, उनको वापस धक्का दो।
सोचो पूरा दिन हम उस घर में रहते हैं ना, पूरा दिन मुझे सेफ महसूस हुआ है। जब शाम, जब आदमी लोग उस कम्युनिटी में आते थे ना, तभी एक ही टाइम था जब मुझे सेफ महसूस नहीं हुआ। तभी एक ही टाइम था, बाकी टाइम हम ये धंधाघर में, हमारे लिए तो घर था वो, धंधाघर ब्रॉथल किसी और का नाम है, ये समझने के लिए यूज कर रहे, पर हमारे लिए घर था। मैं तो पूरा दिन में, तो मुझे फैंटेसीज में रहना बहुत पसंद था, तो मैं जाके पूरा दिन बॉलीवुड मूवीज में, उनका भी वही था ना एस्केप। वो भी क्या करते, वो भी मूवी देखते पूरा दिन, जब कोई रहता नहीं है कस्टमर, और जैसे कस्टमर आते वो हमको भगा देते थे, अभी चुपचाप ऊपर तुम अपने घर पे जाओ। वो सेफ्टी हमेशा से रहा है, और नहीं सुनते थे तो हमको देते भी थे अपना समझ के। अगर अपना नहीं समझते तो नहीं करते ना इतना। तो
फिर आपने स्कूल में पढ़ाई करी, उसके बाद
10वीं तक का मराठी में हुआ था पढ़ाई। महाराष्ट्र में पली बड़ी हूँ, तो बॉम्बे में तो मराठी में हुआ था। फिर 11वीं 12वीं सडनली इंग्लिश हो गया था, तो अब क्या करूँ, क्योंकि और बचपन में बहुत सारा बुलिंग हुआ था, क्योंकि डार्क स्किन में की हूँ। बचपन में डांटी भी सुनी है काफ़ी स्कूल में, टीचरों में। जब मैं बढ़ रही थी तब मैं थोड़ी सी डिप्रेस्ड ही रहती थी, क्योंकि बहुत सारा अब्यूज़, बहुत कुछ हो चुका था तभी। तो बहुत विड्रॉ, मतलब अकेले रहना, आइसोलेशन में रहना ही पसंद करती थी मैं। तो मुझे नहीं पसंद था, और कोई मुझे, और स्कूल में बहुत मार खाया है और बहुत मजाक उड़ाया था मेरा, तो मुझे कॉन्फिडेंस तो बिल्कुल नहीं था। तो
और आपने मेरे को बताया पहले कि मजाक आपके ऊपर, आपके स्किन डार्क होने का ज्यादा मजाक था, ये नहीं था कि आप कहाँ से आए हो।
क्योंकि वो इकोनॉमिक जो क्लास था ना, वो
सारे ही वही थे,
कम वो, मतलब वो तो हाँ। पर ऐसे बहुत लोगों के साथ होता है जब स्कूल में, मतलब हमारी एक लड़की है क्रांति में, जहाँ पे उसके साथ रेप हुआ है। मेरे इसमें अच्छा था कि कहीं ना कहीं वो समझती, पता नहीं कुछ तो था जहाँ पर वो तो नहीं, एक डिफरेंसेस महसूस होता था, कौन कहाँ से आ रहा है ये एकदम से महसूस होता था। पर दोस्ती में वो नहीं था, हम एक दूसरे के डब्बे से शेयर करके खाते थे, तो उतना तो नहीं था।
So at this point I want to tell our viewers something very interesting, and what you just saw Shweta, and I had a chance to speak to her in detail before this show. You've seen a girl who's been brought up in a brothel by her mother, who was a Devdasi, completely uneducated, her nani, who was a Devdasi, completely uneducated, and now Shweta is going to show you what is possible with a little bit of care and little bit of education. So Shweta, now tell us the journey of after you met Kranti, what happened?
So when I came to, I was in 12th grade. As I was saying, 11th, 12th was suddenly in English, and I couldn't imagine sitting in a classroom and being picked by the teacher and asked questions. And I was so scared. I was that scared inside. Then I would go to the campus and come back home. But suddenly in 12th grade, I realized कि भाई, I have to do something. Otherwise, I'm gonna be living in this traumatic
environment.
Victim, yeah, like this entire vicious cycle of my stepfather being alcoholic, abusive, and my mother slaving away all day, and I need to do something for my family. And in that, somehow things worked out pretty well. I reached out to another organization. They reached out to Kranti. Kranti was pretty recent at that time, pretty new, only a year old. And that's when I met Robin. I remember she asked me, what do you want to become? I was studying commerce. I had no idea what chartered accountancy meant. And I said CA. I want to become a CA because I knew there was a lot of money or whatever. That was the conception, the thought at that time. So yeah, then I went to Kranti.
You went to Kranti, then what happens?
Yeah, then I went to. I thought like I was gonna be like in a shelter home, bunk beds, lockers, and it's gonna be very strict. And I remember my first day, my first moments with Kranti. Somebody had come to pick me up. I was crying. I didn't want to be away from my mother. I think that was the hardest thing I'd ever done. And so then I opened the door. Somebody opens the door for me, and this like there's a hall, and there was like 2 BHK, 3 BHK room or something. And I opened the door. There are clothes everywhere, and in the middle of that mess, she's sitting on a beanbag on a table and working, and there are girls like walking around freely, laughing and talking to each other in shorts, which was unthinkable for me. And I was like, what is this place? And I think that kind of homely environment that Kranti created for me was just, I don't think I'd felt that way. It's that safe anywhere, well, except with the mothers, of course, but in an environment, in other organizations, like compared to other organizations, I'd not felt at home, as accepted as I felt at Kranti the moments I entered.
And then you pursued your studies. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so because I was handed Harry Potter books, I did not do so well in my 12th grade. So I didn't, I mean, of course, because of the transition from Marathi to English, I didn't do so well. I got like 47% or something. And Robin knew, like I was not, and Robin has always, I think the reason Kranti exists is to give the best and the quality opportunities possible so we can live, so we can explore who we truly are.
So tell me about your journey, about your applying to...
And anyway, so that's why she decided to then not apply to Indian universities, because we would not get into good colleges, and that's when she...
Why would you not get into good colleges, Robin?
The biggest thing is when you look at just the girls' marks in 12th or 10th or whatever it is, it always just looks like they're bad students. Now, all the stories she's telling about what it's like to show up to school with teachers who are treating you like this, and you know, the amount of school that they miss, and the type of... education has been such a battle for them to kind of incorporate in the mainstream in whatever way possible. It's always been an uphill battle. And then, of course, when they come to Kranti, we try to admit them to normal schools. As soon as they realize, I mean, we have girls who are Muslim, we have girls who are, you know, SC, ST, all of them, every single one of them. And the moment the schools see the name, like I will call the school in my American accent and say, hey, I have a child, I want to bring her for admission. Yes, of course, please come. And when I show up with the child and their documents, it's like, oh no, sorry, we don't have any room. And this happened to me at least 50 times before I actually got through my head that we need an alternative. This just isn't going to work. So even now we have girls who have gone on to study in some of the top institutes in India, and because you know, maybe people might say, oh, SC, ST, but the girls don't even have certificates of any kind. And it's because they don't have documents and they don't have, you know, all the proof of those kinds of things. But really, we've had to battle so many places where they just see, like, they look at the girls and say, she's not going to make it here. And then, of course, you can look at somebody like Shweta and just realize that every girl
let
has
Shweta tell us how she made it in Bard. Go ahead.
So I mean, it was of course Robin who pushed it, and then I took a gap year after 12th, and then because we were not sure what to do, where to apply, and then Robin was the one who said, let's apply to universities in the US, and I was like, I mean, I couldn't.
You don't even know what US is.
Exactly. America was whatever the
Salman
term
Khan
I'd
comes
known
back
in
from
Bollywood
America,
movies.
Yeah.
Huh?
Salman Khan comes back from
Exactly.
America.
I mean, those are the
Impressions.
romantic ideas I had of whatever abroad, in America, whatever. And I had also daydreamt during my childhood years of going abroad.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so then we applied to multiple universities, one or the other. But then we had met someone who from the US consulate whose mother was a friend with director of admissions at Bard College, and then I think that connection happened, and we applied, and they gave me a full scholarship.
Full scholarship.
Yeah, then I think that was the first time I became the first girl from an Indian red light district to study abroad, get a scholarship to study abroad. And yeah, and I think that then that whole different journey began. From
And of
there.
course, you were also selected as 25 under 25.
Yeah, that happened. I don't know why that happened, but it had happened earlier. I
I
think.
want to tell the viewers that Shweta, who's sitting here, has shared the same list as Newsweek had created. Newsweek, right?
Yeah.
Which included people like Malala and some of the other names you were telling me earlier. So that's a very elite list to be in, and it's a very, very incredible achievement. It's not something that is. I mean, even people with all the right background would find it very, very tough to make it there. Did your mother even realize what you have achieved?
I think she was very overwhelmed as I was, and I don't think for her to, because it was all happening so fast, and I think and we were struggling a lot to get passport and stuff, so there was a lot of struggle. We weren't sure if it was going to happen, not happen, but of course she had her faith. And then I think she got really overwhelmed, and I remember even at that time my stepfather would tell my mother, like, oh, whatever your fancy dreams of, you know, oh, she'll go to America, like he'll taunt her and say stuff that to make her feel bad that this is not actually happening, she will never actually make it. But for it to happen, I think she's she's extremely proud, and the fact that I think she's.
So tell me about your in New York. What happens when you go there?
Yeah, I think I was, because I met with two people I really trusted there. They were there in the US already, and one of the girls from Kranti was already there for a short program, and then it was very beautiful. I was scared a lot. I was scared, and the first thing I wanted to do was cut my hair short. I had like a bob cut, and I was not very happy with it. I was like, cut it off, because it was a new space, different environment, and I wanted to explore and be different, or whatever I wanted to explore. And I think I was very scared. I knew very little English, and there was so much attention I was getting from a lot of people from Bard came and talked to me personally, and they were very happy that I was coming. And but I was very scared. But then I made very good friends when I was there. I had friends from, who were Tibet, like from similar people who struggled in their lives. Like I had a friend who was from, whose family was from Bangladesh, but they'd settled in New York, an immigrant family. Tibetans who'd migrated to the US. So all these people, I was deeply connected, and they really helped me throughout. But I think being at Bard was one of those experiences which changed the way I looked at the world, and I became a global citizen at that point, because I was meeting all sorts of people.
I want to ask you a question. Many times, sometimes when you look back in your life, you have actually seen the horror that you could have ended up in, right? And you escaped it because of an intervention of fate, because you were in the right place at the right time, and a person who was on a visit went to a rescue home. There were so many planets that had to fall in line for you to be achieving what you have achieved, to break that vicious cycle. And not only in your case, but hopefully in your next generation, your siblings, everybody, you have sort of done that orbit shift. What if that had not happened? That must have been a nightmare that you think about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do think about it. I think I recently thought, because I realized after going to the US, I realized I hit, I broke down at some point. A lot of my trauma started coming up, and I was struggling heavily with mental health issues for years after that. And then if I look back, and if I had not come to Kranti, I would have been struggling with severe mental health issues, living on the streets with children and nothing to feed them. Or maybe doing sex work, I don't know, yeah. That would have been my reality. I can write it down.
And
You have friends.
there are millions who have that reality.
I have friends who are living like that.
You have friends who live that reality.
Yeah.
But for
Completely.
the fate of...
Yeah, and I got so fortunate, and the fact that, like, even because if not sex work, you're getting married to someone at a very young age. In that, what freedom do you have really? You have to sleep with that person even if you want to, even if you don't want to. And I think for me, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that, because I have the freedom of choice in the way I want to live and how I want to live.
So Kranti, I want to bring this back to you now because this is one of the areas that we like to speak about in this show. This is good work happening. How can we help? How can people help? And I remember talking to you before the show where you told me that actually to do good stuff is very, very hard because there'll be far more number of hurdles and people who will put hurdles in your path when you try to do something good. And one of the things that Kranti told me, Robin told me about Kranti was the fact that even for them to rent a place where they can keep these 15, 20, 30 girls is next to impossible. And the irony is that the day she came in news, why don't you tell the story?
Yeah, and you know, when it was first announced and it came out in the news that she'll become the first girl from a red light area to study abroad and everything, all the newspapers covered it. And the day it came out, that night we were given a notice from our society saying you have 2 weeks to vacate this flat. We went back to them and said, like, what is the problem? We've been here for a year and a half and we've never caused any issues with anyone. And they wrote a formal letter saying these girls are going to have a negative influence on our children. We don't want them interacting or touching or using the same lift as them. You know, all of those kinds of like very,
I don't want you to name the society because those idiots don't deserve to be named. But having said that, I'm sure this must have been a society of educated people.
Yeah, of course.
Aware, working in
Who
MNCs,
were
watching the right programs and talking about equity and pulling out people from the society who are actually kicking out rent-paying people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's this whole not in my backyard kind of concept, right? When we read about somebody like Shweta in the news, wow, look at where, you know, like
where
we're
India
inspired.
Is gone. India has reached
exactly.
there. Huh?
And this should be a moment for you to be proud, like, hey, we are that society
right.
where that education happened, right? To get her there. We contributed so much to it, or we could have, and yet it was literally like 2 weeks later, we are homeless. We've now been through, that was our second eviction, but we've now been through 8 evictions in the past 12 years that I've been working. But when this all was going on, I was 27, maybe 28 years old maximum. So of course, I was also not very savvy about how all these things work, and I was still learning myself how to navigate the Indian systems and context and all of these things. And it was, I've literally had a day where, what do? We had to send all the girls back to the brothels or to their mothers or to wherever, and I just sat on the street and cried. I didn't because for me it's always been a matter of I'm going to live with them and I'm going to raise them literally as if they were my kids. And I know a lot of people run organizations where they have 3,000 children and they say, I'm their mother. I don't want to be anyone's mother because, as you've heard from her, they all have, the ones who have mothers have amazing mothers. Absolutely. People who would give their life and people who have stayed in sex work just to take care of their children. I could never begin to compare to what their mothers have done for them. Yet to me, it was very much a matter of, if I did have biological children, these girls deserve the exact same opportunities that my children would have had, and I'm going to make sure that they get them. Unfortunately, that includes living with them. So living with 20 teenage girls, you can imagine how that goes. But in general, it was like, when they're homeless, I'm also homeless, you know? And our most recent eviction was 6-7 months ago. So it's not like...
And these evictions happen, why? Because when you go to that landlord, they know who you are, right?
No,
you maintain a low profile, otherwise you wouldn't even
orphans. Get it. Yeah, we say we're we're working with orphan girls.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then somehow or another, there was another series of a lot of media attention when we were in the running for a $1 million prize for the Global Teacher Prize or something, and that was also covered quite well within the news. And that eviction was maybe a little bit longer. Maybe they gave us 1 month to get out. So yeah, there's a lot of when you realize that the people who are living in your home are from that community, it just changes everything the next day.
And that's the irony. Those of us who are watching this program and thinking that this program might actually bring value to Kranti would actually probably threaten their next location where they're trying to get a place.
Exactly.
So one of the first and the biggest challenges that you are actually facing is a place where you can help people.
Yeah.
Just a place, just a physical place.
Absolutely. And you know what Mumbai is like. It's, no matter how much we want to pretend that, oh, it's such an open and welcoming place. This is our reality for the past 12 years.
I don't think it's Mumbai. I think it's all cities of the country. There's a lot of talk that happens about helping, empowering, more the English, the nicer it sounds. But when it actually comes to doing it on ground, what you said, not in my backyard. Mere yahan nahi hoga, kahin aur karo.
Exactly.
Right? Where do you see this movement, you and Shweta? Shweta, by the way, just to tell the viewers, she had many options after her education in the US to find work there. And I'm pretty sure those of us who have an experience of corporates would have known that someone like her would have been picked up by a corporate, if nothing else, for a great marquee brand that it would make. But she chose to actually go back to Kamatipura. She went back to Kranti. She went back and she's now working in Kranti and helping the tribe grow.
Yeah.
What do you need from people who are watching?
Support to secure a permanent house where we cannot be kicked out. And just to give an example, all through COVID, we lived in a 1,200 square foot room with 25 girls.
Explain what 1,200 square foot means to people. I need you to explain that to me. Is it one bedroom?
It's 3 bedrooms.
3 bedrooms.
And a large hall. And 3 bathrooms. Thank God there were 3, but there's a lot of fighting over the bathrooms. I mean, what is 25 people in 3 bathrooms, right? And we didn't have Wi-Fi at the time, so the girls were supposed to be in online courses. You know, it was a shit show to say the least. You know, the mental health situation for the girls, for everyone in the whole world, of course, but especially living in a home like this, we don't even have space to cry. The only place you can cry is in the bathroom, and 2 minutes later somebody's knocking on the door because they need to use a toilet. And I think, you know, the biggest limitation for us always has been space. Over the course of these 12 years, we have turned down so many girls who have wanted to come to Kranti simply because, okay, we're 25 people during that time of COVID. How could we possibly deal with 30, right? We've done what we can. There was even a time where we took in a sex worker from a different community just so that she could have a safe place to stay for a month or something. But besides that, like, what is the capacity, the human capacity to live and grow and excel in a space like that? So I think our biggest thing is always like, 1, the security to know that we're not going to get kicked out tomorrow. 2, the space for girls to flourish and heal from the trauma that they've been through the past few years. You know, like literally girls who've been locked in cells and in bars, and, you know, that's where they've spent years of their life living in a cage. For them to have space and a home, as she spoke about, you know, like to feel like this is where I belong and this is where I'm wanted. And 3rd, I guess I would just say, like, we really, really need the financial support to make a home happen where we can take in 40, 50, 60 girls.
I like that part which Robin spoke about, and I know a lot of us have come across many NGOs which proudly speak about being the, you know, what's that, house mother to 3,000 kids and 5,000 kids.
Do you know their names?
Yeah, I know their names. And I know that the numbers that they try to depict to people who they reach out for funding it's a numbers game, that how many more thousand.
Yeah.
It's not a game of qualities. I like that phrase that you can't be a mother to 3,000. You can be a mother to maybe 20, 30, 40. That's the maximum you can be. So I really hope that people who are watching this and people who sort of relate with how fortunate they are.
Yeah.
We won the lottery of life, no, all said and done.
Absolutely.
I mean, of course, no way that anyone can compare against what you have paid to get that lottery ticket, or what rather your mother and your grandmother have paid to get that lottery ticket for you. But I genuinely hope that people who watch this and who recognize that simply by a little bit of financial support, or in your case, especially not just financial support, but also moral support to say, okay, I've got this bloody houses lying here, you take it, and let me see who takes you out from here. If someone like that, you know, even one person watched this show and did something about it, I think it would have been a fantastic outcome. Thanks a ton for coming, Shweta, and just amazing, just amazing what you're doing and what you're doing, Robin.